Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Time Pass. I have with me perhaps the director of one of the greatest films, Hindi films have ever produced, Sholay, and Sudhir Srinivasan, a big fanboy, I think, who is the entertainment editor of the New Indian Express. It's such a pleasure to have you with us, Mr. Sippy, to talk about, I think, everybody's favorite film. And I want to start by, I know that everyone asks you about Sholay all the time, and you made other such lovely films as well. But that's one of the professional hazards of making one of the greatest films in Hindi cinema. So it's your fault.
I can handle it.
So I wanted to start, Mr. Sippy, by asking about what I found very interesting. I was just thinking about it the other day, and you have Sholay, you have Lagan, you have DDLJ, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, and somehow Mother India, of course. And somehow all these movies have
Mughal-e-Azam.
No, not so much Mughal-e-Azam. I'll tell you what I was getting to.
Okay,
The
go ahead.
whole idea that they, in a way, come back to the village. The village is the site for the real action. Even in DDLJ, the first part is in overseas, and the second part is in the pin. And Sholay, of course, they come back to Ramgarh. But the idea of this village that you had for someone who's a city boy, a city slicker, and I think who just come back from America, if I'm not mistaken, just recently. And what was your idea of the village, and how did you sort of, how did it pan out when you were actually making Sholay?
The village was popular at that time because obviously, even today it is, but I guess that's the heart of India.
Yeah.
That's the reason you identify with it strongly. Everybody knows about it. You may be a city guy, but that doesn't mean that you don't know what the village is. That's where it all started.
Yeah.
So my idea of the village came from the fact that a lot of films had been made in the Chambal Valley, the dacoit films. This is the dacoit culture. The film has that dacoit culture. So where should I set it? From the language and all, it's very obvious that it needs, it is talking about the same area because that's where you identify the dacoits to be. And it's a colorful language. But the other factor was, but now how to make it look different from all the other films. So if you go to a kind of a no man's land, which nobody can really recognize, it's just a lovely setting. So told the art director, Achrekar, M.R. Achrekar, would you find us something like this? And what I had in mind was those hard, rocky areas. That's what I told him about. And that led to this journey down south, in and around Bangalore. And the moment I saw the setting in this particular place, we saw a few, but when we happened upon this place, I just felt right.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
It's fascinating.
Sorry?
It's fascinating you mentioned this because typically films set in the north have this arid vibe going on in terms of the location. But the locations in this film seem to have a fair bit of vegetation as well.
Yeah. It was just to break away from that, the arid look, because it's come in every film. So how will this look a little different? Because of the rocks, the atmosphere still exists. It feels that it's out there, nowhere kind of place. But the difference was that it gave a certain solidity to the whole thing, which, like whichever location he took me to, oh God, this will be great for Gabbar's Den. It's a natural setting. I don't have to build a set, because building a set means making it artificial again.
Yeah.
So here's right in the heart of nature. And actually, we ended up with a film which is mostly outdoors. Even if you're at Thakur's house or you're at Basanti's out, it'll always be outside.
Right.
Very rarely that we went indoors. Even the lighting of the lamps,
Yes.
everything was outside.
Yeah.
Overall feel became sort of set for that.
Yeah.
It worked.
I just want to continue with that thought a bit and ask you about a lot was going off screen as well, right? I mean, there was a lot that was going on between, if I may say, between Dharmender and Hema Malini, Amitabh and Jaya. I think that lighting of the lamps.
I'm not going there.
No, but what was it like handling that, the team, handling the cast and crew? And they were all quite young and in the prime of their lives.
Yes. Yes, we were all in the prime.
We're all the same age, I think.
But almost.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a young team in that sense. It was a very energetic team, and all that shows on the film. I don't know whether I can comment because I've decided not to discuss personal affairs. But yes, things happened, and I don't want to go into the details of it. So that's natural. It happens anywhere in the world. When things have to happen, they happen.
And when people spend so much time with each other.
Yes, I guess it becomes more conducive to, to the more romantic elements. But I would rather steer away from this if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Now, in case someone who's watching this conversation is wondering why we are talking about Sholay now,
yes,
I'm not sure we mentioned it. It's because it's completed 45 years very recently. So that's, of course, the reason we're having this conversation. An excuse to have this conversation, if you will. Because it's been 45 years, I want to talk about one of the legends surrounding this film is about how when it came out, it didn't do particularly well immediately after it came out. There was a fair amount.
That's a myth.
Oh, it is. I see.
I'll tell you what's true about it and what's not.
Yeah.
Please, absolutely.
It was the most awaited film. The star cast. When we started, Amitabh was not a star, but by the time we finished the film, Diwar and Zanjeer and Diwar and had been released. So he had become a star during the making of the film. But at the time of the release, he was.
Yeah.
So to see so many people there and not have an opening or have a poor impression in the beginning is not true. We had a fantastic advance booking. Those days, we did not release the film simultaneously. It was in pockets because there was no piracy. Of course, there was no all these problems we didn't have. Okay, so when you take this atmosphere of the rocks and what you really want to present finally is the hardcore of the story, which is about a dacoit and which is about exploitation of the poor and all that. That's what you want to capture. And then, of course, the interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
So I think as it finally turned out, that decision was a good one, that we went there and captured that kind of atmosphere which had not come on the Indian screen before.
Before that, yeah.
Right.
And of course, taking all the paraphernalia with it, your horses and your slices and your, army of workers. One day they're building this, one day they're building that. They even built that little road, the up and down for the opening shot of the motorcycle song.
Right.
There was a built road by us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was not a north. It was set in very natural surrounding. It was created because of those bumps. I wanted
right.
disappear and appear,
Right.
So just for that shot.
Right.
So, Mr. Sippy, tell me, is there any truth that you considered changing the end of this film? Is there any truth to that at all?
Again, not true.
Okay, right.
But why it went around, I need to tell you that. One was the death of Gabbar,
Yeah.
which I had originally picturized and wanted that to be the original ending. That the censors had a big row with being on that.
They thought it was too gory, right?
I think they had a problem using
whatever it was, they didn't want a police officer taking law into his hands and shooting a guy.
Okay.
So that became a point of controversy, and you cannot have a controversy during the emergency.
Yes.
Right.
We forget that was the emergency.
In June, the emergency had come about before the censorship.
Right.
Before that, if it was earlier, maybe we may have got away with it, but
at
that time we could not. So that was that. But the other controversy that came about was there was a hue and cry, oh, why does Amitabh have to die?
Of course. Right.
So that was not a part of the story at all. They would have wished him to go on. It was that kind of feeling. But that's what we want. I kept arguing with everyone, but amongst us, there was no confusion as to what it should be. But with the outsiders, so the critics had panned it on the Saturday of the release.
Right.
And the pall of gloom was all over the industry, and especially with us, that we were the manufacturers of this pall of doom. And we were going to close the industry down. I mean, it's like that.
Right.
How can you make a film like this? How can you make a film so expensive? And how can you make it with these kind of themes and this kind of that? So there was a lot of criticism. And having served such notice to the film, they found it difficult to retrieve. Because you can't, as the master of your trade, say one thing on a Saturday and be off with it by Monday or Tuesday. You can't change your mind, or the next week. It took them 7 weeks to admit that they had made a mistake. They literally said that the end of industry.
Yeah.
I mean, if films like this are made here, then there's no way this can work.
Do you remember any critic who praised it?
Sorry?
Do you remember any critic who praised it?
Not really.
Yeah?
Not really.
Not a single one.
I don't remember. But I'm talking more of the trade.
Right.
There was those trade guide and all those kind of papers that.
So it must have come as a lot of vindication to you when eventually the verdict changed.
Yeah, I don't think they also meant it like that, but they probably took a stand. Maybe something personal. I have no idea. In these kind of things, it's possible.
Right. What I want to talk about, I want to ask you about what a fascinating mixture of themes Sholay is. On one end, it feels like a Western, of course. There are a lot of those influences.
Yes, very, very admittedly so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, we saw McKenna's Gold and Magnificent Seven, and inspired by Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And I mean, you have to take, when you want to do something, there's absolutely nothing wrong in looking up to films like that and wanting to achieve something. I said, why can't this be done in our country?
Right.
It was very ambitious, but we felt that that's the kind of atmosphere we want to create.
And the reason I think it works so well is, despite those influences, it was also firmly rooted in the Indian ethos.
Correct.
The system here.
From there, that was the atmosphere. but keep it rooted into Indian values was important. Please go ahead.
I mean, I found it quite astonishing that so many of its ideas in terms of story structure, or the very nature of how each scene played out, have endured not just in Hindi cinema, but also in South cinema also. I noticed, I mean, as I was revisiting the film yesterday, I looked at each scene and I was almost counting the number of films I had seen the scenes in. Okay, so this film, okay, so this scene was taken from Sholay, this scene was taken from Sholay, you know what I'm saying? You catch yourself watching some cinema and going, yeah, but yeah, we did this.
No, I think we're always good makers are always inspired by them. We may not admit it, but we're always inspired by somebody and by some work of some master somewhere. And we're always, I mean, at least I'm very, very thankful for what I had gone through in my youth and what all I was influenced by, which I wanted the grandeur and I wanted the atmosphere and colorful characters and all. I didn't want to make it a Western film. I wanted to keep it essentially Indian. And the writers, Salim Javed, and we certainly had no intention of doing anything like making it look like a Western. There was a film made with Feroz Khan in the lead, and Narendra Bedi directed it. And it came about a year and a half just before Sholay. And with that Mexican jabba on him.
Right.
And now that felt like, now, has this been made in India?
Right.
Or is it? So there you could see that it was a straight lift out of that.
Right.
Because nobody wears that in India.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. I want to ask you about something else. I read somewhere that dacoits don't never go around riding on horses.
True.
Oh, okay, right.
They used to move on jeeps or for terrain like that, any kind of vehicle that works on terrain like that. But a horse is a very beautiful animal. So to capture that kind of thing, and which was part of what I used from the Indian films as well, because they had also established that in Ganga Jamna and Mujhe Jeene Do, and all these films carried. So I said, this is one part that I'm not going to change.
Mr. Sippy, may I ask about the dialogues? Because this is one film where the dialogues are more memorable than the songs, and which has also created the tradition of dialogue bazi in Hindi cinema. So,
Dialogue bazi in Hindi cinema is as old as Mughal-e-Azam also.
Of course. But here you have dialogues which are memorable even today. I mean, even today you find ads using them. Mughal-e-Azam had very specific dialogues which are very specific to that era. Here you have
dialogue bazi. Yeah. I mean, dialogue bazi, so without that, Indians won't take it.
Indians, yeah, exactly. But how is it when you hear those lines repeated in ads, repeated in movies, repeated by people around you, even now, 45 years later?
Something that a phenomenon is something you cannot explain. It happens.
I mean, if I can, sorry, go on.
You may do your best.
Right.
You can put in the best of effort. You can make a technically polished product. You can get the best of actors and get the best of performances. You can get technique to, we've had 70 mm and stereophonic sound. So all that you can have because that you can plan and do right. But a phenomenon is something that when all this was put together, and it created a certain kind of mesmerizing effect, which is something that you cannot plan on paper. It's impossible. That is why today we're talking about it 45 years later. Right. It was not intended, please.
Right. Adding on to
what I'm very, very happy and grateful that it happened that way.
But what's your favorite dialogue from it?
How can I? Those lines, listen. Kitne aadmi the? By itself, can you think of that line as being a great line?
No, but it's the context.
It's Context.
Yeah.
And that's why when used in different, it's a great line because it's usable anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Adding on to the
I can
dialogue bit, I
understand
want
this. Itna sannata kyun hai bhai? That's a nice line.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's used in so many different ways. Even that is used in so many different ways today.
Right.
what I found very interesting about the dialogue particularly is that I thought it was unusually deep for certain situations. Like the dialogue when Thakur is talking about society, when he's proposing the idea of widow remarriage.
Yeah.
When he talks about how society was created to avoid isolation, so it's unfair that it should isolate people like Radha. Now, would you attribute this poetry? I sense a certain poetry to a lot of these dialogues. Would you attribute it to the instincts of Mr. Javed Akhtar?
Of course, I need to give him a lot of credit, but don't forget that the very first film I made, Andaz
had widow. Yeah.
A widow remarriage scene was there as well.
Yes.
Bringing out the woman, giving her a place, giving her a second chance to at life. So it was in my blood as well. And I think Mr. Salim Javed deserves absolutely all the credit. There is no way I can. Just yesterday we were talking, and he has said why. I still don't understand why you didn't take credit for the script and for the thing of Sholay. But I have never professed to be a writer, professional writer. So I'd rather that whoever has. I mean, they did a fabulous job. I mean, everything was based on that. The rest was all you're just enhancing and building on it. But the basic stuff came from them.
Right. And it's not just about the this widow character, of course. I also enjoyed largely the film's gaze on women in general, and even minorities. For example, you show some good Muslims in the film. There is this widow character. Even Basanti, she's a part of action sequences. She's shown to have a lot of agency.
Yeah.
When
she's
these
an assertive woman, yes.
Yeah.
She's very assertive, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, since I am not from that time, do you remember if these angles resulted in a fair amount of shock back then?
It was appreciated, but don't forget, even at that time, there was that famous Nadia. Hunterwali.
Yeah.
And don't forget, in Sita or Geeta too.
Yeah.
Hema Malini played the very strong woman who takes revenge on behalf of Sita. So these themes, I mean, these kind of characters have been created by us earlier. So it's not that it was entirely new. But to Indian audiences, this was definitely not an everyday thing. It was it was out of the ordinary, certainly.
Can I ask you an additional question just before we move on to another topic? Did you not wanting to follow through on the remarriage angle of the widow lead to Amitabh Bachchan's character, sort of getting killed?
No.
Did that play a part at all in that?
No. I think if the very fact that there was so much of a hue and cry of him getting killed at the end, I think it would have been perfectly acceptable if he did not die. So, that's what they wanted. But I felt it would have taken away an emotional slice from the film, which it would not have been the same. The whole revenge and the climax would not have been the same. So I think what we finally stayed with was the correct storytelling.
Right.
Mr. Sippy, may I also ask you about the pure evil that Gabbar was and he epitomized? When you look at cinema now, you don't have that kind of pure evil villain. The villain has largely sort of disappeared. And in your films, even Shan, you had really iconic villains. What has changed that the villain no longer has that primacy in Hindi cinema?
Who knows? I think it's probably because the villains were always there, but they were hidden behind facades, which these were pure evil because they were out there in that little village. There was no getting away from the fact that a villain is a villain, but otherwise you have them cloaked in other colors, and they're still doing all the.
In the city, you can't tell who's a villain and who's a hero. They all look the same.
Yeah, I mean, you suddenly realize, oh, this guy was doing all these. You begin to hear about it, but then you don't really know it till it all comes out.
So society itself has changed so much that that you don't any longer have that kind of delineation.
There may still be, when you hear of incidents like what is happening today, somebody is raped, somebody is murdered, so it still must be happening somewhere. And this is not just India, it's all over the world.
Right.
So there are people like that. It's just how you want to tell your story and what you feel is the right way of presenting it. I think Mahesh Bhatt's film where he brought that Sadak, was it?
Right.
The woman, man, woman.
Sadashiv Amrupurkar, yes. So that character.
Exactly. So I think it's what you decide and how you want to present it. That finally, it's your baby. You decide which way to go.
I suppose Gabbar being all black, in a sense, helped audiences identify him as a villain, because this is also a film in which Amitabh and Dharmendra do not so nice things too, even though they're nice guys.
Right. It's changing the moral fiber in that sense that you don't have to be all good or you don't have to be all evil.
Right.
There are parts of you which are parts of you which, I think it's more realistic than just a pure. Yes, earlier films did have that absolutely straightforward person who would be so true to his character and would not budge this way or that way. They felt more real. All the characters felt more real they were.
And I always felt, Sudhi, that the real romance was between Dharmendra and Amitabh Bachchan.
True.
The romance, so to speak.
Very physical.
It still lives on, yes.
Yeah.
Dosti, the one song, sort of embodies it all.
Yeah. I mean, it's the ultimate friendship that you show on screen.
Yep.
Now, it's impossible to discuss Sholay without discussing the impact it's had on Indian cinema at large and all the tropes that it has helped create, in many following decades of cinema. However, I have to say that some of, for example, even though the Basanti character had a lot of agency and a lot of strength, it appears that that character being a chatterbox has been the trope that has seemingly survived in a lot of our masala cinema since then. It would almost be, in much of our cinema, I noticed that they're showing the silly chatter stereotype in woman as an almost aspirational quality. You know what I'm saying? The item song has been picked up since then, the milking and over-the-top homosexual character for comedy. So there have been these sort of smaller elements that have persisted, like having the hero threaten suicide to get a woman falling in love with him. Even if they were treated as comedy in your film, it appears that these tropes have also been liberally borrowed since then. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, if I could be inspired by other characters from other films and earlier times, it's fine if future generations and future makers have used it. I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm not uncomfortable with that. If they're comfortable with that, and I think they have a right to, a film doesn't have to be exactly what it should be, or I should not borrow this from here or not, but as long as what you create finally has a semblance of something different, it's okay. If you literally lift it and use it, then it doesn't feel good.
Of course. No, I didn't mean to discuss this in terms of an accusation of plagiarism or any such
thing.
Right.
So they're using it as inspiration, fine.
So what I meant to really get to was was when you notice a heroine, for example. I mean, heroines are shown as ideal creatures, right? When women watch them on screen, they aspire to be like them. So when you notice like a bunch of heroines in different masala films being shown as just, dull-headed, talkative women, seemingly inspired by the Basanti prototype, right? However, without the strength that Basanti had in Sholay. Now, do you see that as a positive outcome? Do you have a problem with that? Do you wish that they would also add some of that strength into these characters?
But that, as a student of cinema, I was inspired by certain things, and as a maker, I imbibed those things and put them there. I think people who then get inspired by that should also keep that in mind, that it should have a little more than just the caricature part of it, right, and use the heart as well in their own way. But yes, I think they would do well to do that. As a teacher, being part of the Ramesh Sippy Academy of Cinema and Entertainment, I mean, today, as a teacher, I would tell my students to try and put more into it than just a kind of character or a line or a thing. That's what I would always ask them to subscribe to, rather than just.
Right.
Mr. Sippy, I've always wondered, I mean, that era didn't have professional casting agents. And you have so many characters in this movie, people who live on, even if they had just one line or one scene, whether it's Surma Bhopali or Angrezon Ke Zamane Ka Jailer. How did you cast each and every of those main characters? And you have, I think, about over 50 main characters.
Should we call it a good body of advisors with Salim Javed? As
they advised you on a lot of the casting.
They helped, yes.
Yeah.
Suggestions here and there, and yeah, we did it jointly. But I mean, they were very inspiring for all of it. I mean, so casting also, they would come across some actor or actress they thought like Surma Bhopali. So Javed Saab said, this guy does this kind of character well. If we bring him into this part, it might, and it worked wonders. It was superb. Just 2 scenes, but
yeah.
Were these comedy portions added as an afterthought, or is that a myth as well?
Not at all. They were all part of the script.
They were.
As a matter of fact, when distributors who got frightened right at the beginning, and they were told, and there was also, there were 2 factors. One was the emergency.
Yeah.
And so they said at night, we cannot have, the show has to end before 12 o'clock. So it was important to start early. So now with a 3 hours, 20-minute film, the first show had to start at 8:30 or 9 in the morning.
Right.
And that was being hampered. So collections, money, everything, box office, all those factors come into play.
Of course.
This can be removed about 20 minutes, bring it down to 3 hours because of the emergency. Of course, they said because of the emergency. They were actually saying because the reports are all mixed.
Yeah.
And there is a feeling that it may not be working. So let's try a sharper and shorter version. And what we told them is there are these 2 comedy sequences. One was the Asrani section, and one, the other major sequence was the Surma Bhopali sequence.
Yes.
So if you remove these, the storytelling will go along. It won't affect the story. Sorry?
I want to talk to you about a sequence in this film that was particularly, I thought, a remarkable stretch. I'm referring, of course, to the sequence that seems to give emotional gravitas to this film, the flashback of Thakur's family being killed. I thought it was particularly economic in terms of how it was filmed, even though, a group of people are killed there. I thought it was almost American, the use of the wind, tempting to almost showing the boy's body, but never really doing it. I thought there was a lot of that going on there. Could you talk to me about your inspirations for that stretch? Because that seemed particularly unique in that film.
As they say, sometimes things conspire. Nature conspires. We started to shoot that film, shoot that sequence. And 2 days we shot. The sequence was as it was supposed to be, but it was just straight that the Thakur returns and he finds the family massacred. So when he arrives there and sees this, so the impact emotionally would still be similar and, well, intended to be like that. But after 2 days of shoot, the clouds came out, the sun disappeared.
Right.
So we kept waiting for the sun, kept waiting for the sun. On the third, or rather the fourth day of shoot, so it was the second day of waiting, I spoke to the cameraman. Is it possible to shoot this in this weather? And as I sat with it, it started to grow on me. It's somehow a sense of doom is created by it. And then what will naturally follow is a bit of the wind and the rise. And so that when he gets on his horse to ride out of there, it will build up very nicely to that moment. And the more I thought about it, it felt like that's the way it should be. It's the same sequence, characters are the same, everything is the same, but it would look far more, you will not believe, you use the word economy, there is a sense of economy in this. It was exactly the opposite. It took me 23 days to shoot that sequence.
23 days?
Because of the weather,
right.
When you want the sun, when you want the clouds, that's when they disappear. So we kept doing some wide shots in that kind of atmosphere, and then the close-ups we did by covering the top and shooting it in a way that we won't waste time, not too much time. But to make all those adjustments took so long that it ultimately took 23 days to shoot, which of course included the shooting of the characters as well. And this put together, it took 23 days to shoot. So, but as they say, things conspire.
Right.
They conspired and they were with me.
Mr. Sippy, we're coming towards the end of the discussion now. So I wanted to ask you, and of course I'll ask Sudhir to take a couple of questions as well. I wanted to ask you about, as a leader of the industry, when you see what's happening around you currently, the whole insider-outsider debate, nepotism, nepotism kids and all that. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's more created in, I think, controversy and all the, I don't think, what is called nepotism, it does not apply in the industry because here talent counts a hell of a lot. And those who have come from outside and have a lot of talent, whether it's Mr. Bachchan or whether it has not in any way stopped careers from happening ever. Yes, some of there are advantages to being a part of a family that's been in the line, but that happens to an Ambani or anybody in any other other line in the country as well. I mean, you're a Tata's son, or you're a Bajaj, or you're whatever the big top guys are, the Kumara Mangalams and are also part of a family. So they will get their advantages. That's fine. And to start up, it helps. But to actually be something and grow in this industry, ultimately it's you, your talent, your the way you take it. So of course there will be a little bit of it. I keep saying that, but it's not. There is no way it can be the only way to get into this line. So that I don't think it's a substantial argument.
Why do you think Sushant Singh Rajput's death why has it caught the imagination of everyone? I mean, it has caught it, whether we like it or not, whether we acknowledge it.
Any major star,
yeah,
if he commits suicide, he will
yes.
not be a talking point. Today, your press and are so strongly there that what are they going to talk about if this is the event that has happened? It will be across all lines and there'll be all kinds of stories. So it's a natural part of 2020.
Right.
It will happen. It's a controversy because there's an emotional angle to it. There is a huge talent. He was so wonderful, such a fine actor. So you don't want anybody who goes that young is going to be lamented. I mean, there is no other way of looking at it. It's tragic. Why should it happen?
Right.
And now, I think it's unfair to talk about it till all this settles down. We know what actually happened.
Right.
Right. It's best to leave it and let it all come out the way it's unfair, but then best we get to the end of it.
Yes.
Which is why I want to take you back to Sholay, and I have a couple of questions.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll end with your questions on Sholay, Sudeep.
Absolutely. This is my penultimate question. I want to talk about Amitabh's character. I thought it was, I mean, he wasn't angry, he wasn't talking much. It was almost a Western character in a sense, wasn't it? The careless young man whose rare dialogue would simmer with wit and sarcasm. I mean, I almost laughed out loud quite a few times. There's a scene when Dharmendra says, I'm thinking, and Amitabh just quips, yeah, you should do that once in a while.
Yes.
Very, very short exchanges like that. So do you want to talk to me about whether Viru's over-the-top behavior accorded you with the freedom to explore a subtle character like that, even though Amitabh was...
Well, that's exactly how it happened, because you have Viru on one side and you have Jay. So it's nice to play these contrasts when it plays to your advantage. So, and you have Basanti and you have Radha. So it's just all naturally in it. So you don't have to do all that much to bring it out beautifully. I guess my work was laid out for me and I enjoyed doing it.
As a final question, there has always been news about the possibility of a sequel to Sholay, and I think you also periodically dropped a hint or two here and there about the sequel to this film. Do you see that happening?
I was never for it.
I see. Okay. Because I remember reading in the late 90s, I think, a quote attributed to you that said it could be in the works, sort of thing. I'm not sure.
No, certainly not from me. Because I was of a very firm opinion. I may be wrong, but I think it is so strongly entrenched in people's then to take it further. Jay is no more.
Yeah.
To take the story further would not be maybe a prequel. I don't know. But whether it would have the same. And when I have a film, we're talking 45 years later, right?
Yes.
Now, why do I need to have a follow-up to that? It just didn't feel right.
Fair enough, and I do think we could spend another hour discussing the film's facets as well.
Yes, it was quite a masterclass in how a film is made and how it can be made memorable. Thank you so much, Mr. Sippy, for joining us, and it was lovely talking to you.
Thank you all. Thank you
Thank
very much, all of
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you.